I think one of the things I'm curious about is like, how do you identify or detect, like, what are the mechanisms you can do to detect some of those things, like those disconnections from people? At the beginning, we mentioned the sentiment survey that LinkedIn used. I think of a few other ones I know are it sounds like with Erica, the listening tour is a great way to get sort of inputs of what's going on. Are there other detection mechanisms that you might offer as a practice for people to try out or use to detect early signals of burnout?
I mean, there's basic one-on-ones, right? I think sometimes we focus on work, and Sabry was alluding this to before, but we actually should repurpose them more about what is the well-being of that individual. Because even though you may have listening sessions or forums, how uncomfortable if you have something very personal that you want to share in a public forum, that's really, really difficult. But if you're in a one-on-one and you offer like first your vulnerability and sharing how you're feeling or what you're going through, guess what, that opens up a door for them to feel comfortable to share the same. And I've had so many personal one-on-ones, especially during this time, that we've laughed, we've cried, we've gone through so many different emotions, and if anything, that brought us so much closer. I think we all try and be perfect and button up, and I've leaned on Sabry and Lori so many so many times, tearing literally. And you think, oh, they're VPs, they got it all figured out. We're all broken sometimes in some ways, so it's okay to share that. And so I think it's just important. Those one-on-ones are key. That's where you're going to get the authenticity between two individuals.
So the iceberg that Lori talked about is that analogy is 100% correct. And when you ask about detection mechanisms, it's incredibly difficult right now. It's really hard to tell, because how are you going to do that? How are you going to measure signals? How are you going to capture sentiment, short of constantly asking people how they're doing, which can also be overwhelming for them. And so, Erica says like a basic one-on-one. Well, so this is key, like going back to just some fundamental stuff that as human beings, we are social creatures and we need social connection. One of the best mechanisms that I've seen is this idea of a skip level. So are you meeting with individuals on your team that don't necessarily report directly to you? Secondly, are you meeting with colleagues in your company that aren't necessarily a part of your team, either through a connection through an ERG or maybe just people that you know? And so really it comes down to time management, like the age-old time management. What's on your calendar? And Erica alluded to this earlier. What's on your calendar that's important? And really over-indexing on creating connections with people, because the detection mechanism sometimes is really just that one-on-one, is really that conversation. And beyond it, it's really hard to get signals, especially across bigger teams.
Yeah. One other thing I would add, Patrick, I was just thinking about this, a tip that I would apply that I use for my team is I actually started to ask my team, because I can tell that their energy was different. The way they entered the room was different. And it wasn't just an individual. It was like the whole team was starting to feel burnt out. They were just like, this is a lot. So one of the things we actually did was we took one of our staff meetings and just said, hey, let's look at everything that we have on our plate. Let's prioritize together. What has to get done? What can we decide as a team to hit a pause? What can we decide as a team that we're going to punt to next quarter? Whatever those things are, so that it could really focus in on who has capacity, who has bandwidth, who doesn't. Because again, those individual triggers of where it's driving burnout could be different for each person. So it actually turned into a really open, honest discussion about, do we put too much on the plate? Because again, like Sabry said, you look up, you're in your office till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night because you're not setting adequate boundaries. And we just started to incorporate those conversations with the prioritization exercise. Once we had it out on the table, we could also say others could volunteer to help each other. I'll take this from you. I'll do that. How could we redesign this project to be a one-to-many approach versus all of us having to do it? And it really helped us to kind of parse through new ways to deliver instead of just saying everybody had to own the same things. But it started from that energy in the room just being like, whoa, that the balloon was deflated, as I call it. It's just walking in where everybody's heavy. and just figuring out ways to put a little bit more air in the room, pump it back up a little bit, but being open to new ways to solve.